for coming here. I heard I'm going to give a talk on Friday afternoon starting at 3 o'clock, and I went, yeah, right. So I'm blown away by how many of you showed up. It's really impressive. And I guess it's an indication of both the interest in this topic, which is sure a hot topic, and I think the science behind it and the validity behind it, kind of the evidence that really shows us, that has shown us that it makes a difference. So help me out a little bit now, because I guess I know just one of you. I don't really know any of you. How many of you practice mindfulness? Is this a group of people who all practice? Okay, so 50-50. All right. Would you like to practice mindfulness today? Or how many of you would like to actually practice it today? Okay, 80%. All right. Okay. So I'm going to hold to a hard and fast deadline of 4 o'clock, because I know that's what you promised, and I know that it's Friday afternoon. You've got other things to do. So I have a very ambitious agenda. I'd like to tell you what mindfulness is. I'd like to tell you why you aren't going to like it when you do it. I'd like to tell you why you need to do it, why it's not just important, but I think essential. And I'd like to tell you what would happen if you did it for a while. And then I'd like to practice it with you. Maybe not all in that order. So for me, I've been doing this, as you heard, since I was a kid. I actually started practicing meditation when I was 8, but I only really became a sort of formal student of it when I was 14. And in the early 80s, I was authorized to teach it in the context of Tibetan Buddhism. So I taught meditation as a Tibetan Buddhist. And that was a lot of fun, actually. But I was a total weirdo, you know, and I taught it at Penn, and people would sort of roll their eyes at me. Unfortunately, I was in the context of the School of Medicine, and I was a medical doctor, and I was a good medical doctor, and I could sort of get away with it because I did everything else well. But it was something that I did because it was my passion. I did it on my own time, on nights and weekends, and I did it because I thought it was important. And I never expected anybody else to really have that much interest in it. I never thought that it would hit prime time or be on the cover of Newsweek and Time magazine in the same year, or have the kind of following that it does now. And I think that there are a lot of reasons for that. It certainly had a huge impact in some fields, but to say it really simply, it's just that now, at this point, we have a body of evidence, of real science, that has pretty conclusively demonstrated that mindfulness is good for you. And it's come to our culture through a kind of an interesting journey. If you follow the history of meditation, and mindfulness is a kind of meditation, so I guess I'll say that up front. I don't use that word meditation much. I think that it creates more trouble than is necessary, because people have funny ideas about meditation. The concept of meditation came to our culture really around the end of the 19th century, when there was a big interest here in Eastern things, Eastern religions, Eastern occultism, flying carpets, seances, talking to the dead, Ouija boards, mind reading, crystal ball gazing, stuff that is perfectly interesting, I guess, but you probably don't learn about it at Wharton. Probably. I don't know, some of you are looking unsure, but I didn't think so. I certainly don't get to teach about it in the School of Medicine, and actually I'm not interested in it at all. It gets in the way, but meditation gathered this aura of occultism and Eastern spirituality that has been a real obstacle for a long time now. Because meditation, or mindfulness as we'll call it, mindfulness is is the word now that we use for a subset of meditation practices. I'll talk about that subset later. Mindfulness really can be viewed outside of any historical or conceptual context as purely a way of training your mind and strengthening your mind to do something better. Meditation is a way of exercising your mind. That's a funny thing to say, like, do you get it to do a push-up? Or, like what does it mean to exercise your mind? Is that like, memorizing, I don't know what you'd have to memorize at Wharton. Memorizing, how to calculate an interest rate, or I don't know, what's the hardest thing you have to learn?
I don't spend a lot of time on academics.
Well, I can identify that. No, but meditation is a way of strengthening the part of your mind that pays attention. I think of meditation as a way of strengthening attention. And that's kind of a funny thing to think about. Like, well, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean to strengthen attention? It's not teaching you to learn to calculate anything better. It's not, teaching you to think faster or to work harder. It strengthens this single capability of your mind that we call attention. And that strengthening has consequences for all sorts of cognitive, affective, and neural systems that we really depend on, that we depend on desperately. When you strengthen a capability, like let's say you want to strengthen your bicep. So what do? You don't like, oh, nice little bicep, like relax and grow. What you do with your bicep is you pick up a weight and you use that muscle, that capability, to the point where it's exhausted, right? You pick up a weight and use it against gravity, against the resistance of gravity, until your arm is so tired that you actually can't pick it up anymore. When we practice meditation, we do something similar but not identical, which is that we use a capability that is the capacity of our attention to rest in a simple way on an attentional focus, that is an object that you pay attention to. And that's the exercise that you do with your mind. That's what meditation is. Does that sound boring? Yes. Actually, when you, when you lift a weight, you're lifting it against the resistance of gravity. When you focus your attention, you're focusing it against the resistance of boredom, restlessness, impulse, wandering thoughts. The things that take your attention away. Actually, the things that make it hard to study. When you're distracted, irritated, hungry, upset, sleep deprived, or just plain darn cranky. Those are the things that make it hard, to learn. And those are the things that you're working against when you focus your attention. Now, when you lift a weight against this gravity, for an hour or whatever, I don't know how many, you can do this all the times that I can, just from across the table even. So I get tired first, but when we reached our capacity, would we feel stronger or weaker? Weaker. We wouldn't even be able to pick our arm up anymore. If it was our first experience with a personal trainer, we wouldn't be able to walk up the stairs to our apartment. We'd have to call for a taxi or sleep at the bottom of the stairwell. So when we practice meditation, often what we find is that we don't feel more balanced, we don't feel more peaceful in any kind of way, our mind doesn't feel stronger in any kind of a way. That's because we've used it and we have strengthened it. We are strengthening it. But people think, oh, this can't be working for me. I'm actually crazier than I was when I started. Well, yes and no. Because you're strengthening your capacity to notice, which is what attention is. So you start noticing what's happening in your mind instead of being able to ignore it. And so the people who've practiced this before are nodding their heads going, oh yeah, that's actually what happens. So why would you give a hoot about whether you could strengthen your attention or not? Do you really care if you have the best attention in the room? Damn right you care. And if you don't, you're just not thinking about what it really is. What is attention? What is attention anyway? You're using it right now to look at me. I've been talking probably for about 10 minutes, and I know, because I do research on this, I know that your attention isn't as focused as it was when we started, right? Can you notice that you're drifting off a little bit? Some of you are too polite to nod yes, but some of you are, I wouldn't say you're impolite, but honest, right? Attention, like wanders away. And our ability to actually manage what our minds do is an incredible strength in life. Because this thing that I'm calling attention, it is not some abstract thing that you study in the cognitive neuroscience lab. This attention is the doorway through which you have a life. This attention is the doorway through which everything that you ever can possibly learn has to enter. And actually, the way that learning works is that you use your attention to bring something in, it gets encoded in some kind of a way that's not relevant here, and then you have to bring it in again and again and again if you want to remember it. So that's what you do when you study. So when your attention is stronger, you learn better. There's research that came out. It was a paper that was published in, I can't remember if it was 2013 or the beginning of 14, but that showed that students, college students, who did a 2-week training in meditation had really significant, dramatic increases in scores on the graduate record exam, apparently as a result of that training. Just 2 weeks? That's amazing. But you know what? The reason why you really care about this is not that strengthening your attention is going to make you a better student. Why do I know that? Because I bet you're all pretty good students already. I mean, everybody wants to be better, I know. But that is not the most important thing. The reason why you really care and are going to care more and more as you go through your life is that your attention is the way that you have a life. It's not just everything that you learn comes to you through your attention. Everything, your whole life, is only contacted through attention. Everything that you love, every person that you ever touch, everything that you see that is beautiful, everything that you feel, everything that you know, everything, without exception, that comes into what you call yourself, whether it's an inexperience like a thought or a feeling or a belief or something in the world, a sensation, an experience, an event, they come to you through this attention. Now, we think about attention as if it were a flashlight. Like, you're looking at me now. So your flashlight is focused on me, and the rest of the room is still here, but it's not getting the brightness of that attention. So, like if you're in a dark room and you have a flashlight, the thing the flashlight illuminates is like the circle of your attention. That's what you're able to see. It's a metaphor. And in fact, your ability to control attention, to move it here and to hold it here, is the first thing, I think, that strengthens as you practice mindfulness. So in fact, we did research in this. I teach a class at Penn. Actually, the class this year has a stack of Wharton students in it. Suddenly the Wharton School got interested in it this year. It's a class offered through the School of Medicine, but it's not about medicine. It's about mindfulness. When we talk about the science of mindfulness, the cognitive neuroscience of mindfulness, kind of the effect of it, how it affects relationships and people, and all sorts of things, I think that are interesting about that. But we took students in this class. The students in the class actually practice meditation. It's required to be in the class. So it's kind of like a laboratory class. You know, you don't just talk about it, but you have to do it to be in the class. And we did measures of their attention at the beginning of the class and the end of the class. At the time we did this, the class was only 8 weeks. It was a different class. And we found that there were dramatic increases in their ability to sustain an attentional focus, to resist distraction. And later in the same group, we also found that they had better working memory, which is correlates well actually with intelligence and is kind of a measure of how many things you can keep in your mind at the same time, like how I don't want to say how well you can multitask, but how well you can keep on task is really what's important about it. But that's not the most important thing that happens when your attention is strengthened. Because in this metaphor of a flashlight, what really happens with your attention, what really matters is not that you're able to control the light, although that's great, but that the light gets brighter. What does that mean? Well, it means that your life gets brighter. It's that suddenly you feel more. Suddenly you're more connected to what's out there. Suddenly you care more. You connect better. Your relationships improve. You have clarity about what you feel, so you connect with your inner compass. Everything is simplified, intensified, and focused in a way that makes it more simple and more clear. It has a lot to do with emotional intelligence, because in the same way that you're able to focus or experience something on the outside with clarity, you begin to have more clarity about your inner experiences. Some of the most important components of leadership come as a result of this. I'm not going to talk about that in specific because, you can take this course next semester if you want to. It's a long, complicated story. But I can tell you which neural areas are strengthened by this training and how they affect these capabilities that contribute to leadership or actually to other functions that are really important to us. Okay, so I'll go a little bit faster. Can I have 8 weeks to do this? This is not, no way is this enough. So let me just go to the paradigm of what happens here. So I told you that you're strengthening this capability, but now actually we know specifically in a concrete way, because of all of this science, because of this cognitive neuroscience, we know specifically what happens and why it happens. Because what we found is that when you use a part of your brain over and over again, with time, you change the structure of it. A researcher who was then at Harvard, she's German, and I think she's now back in Germany, but I think she was a postdoc at Harvard, found that when people practiced mindfulness for just 8 weeks in one of these standard, mindfulness-based stress reduction programs, they had changes in the structure of a number of really important brain areas in 8 weeks. In particular, the thing that was most interesting to me is in the people who reported that they were less stressed. So if you look at what they said about their experience of stress, the people who said they were less stressed had decreases in the gray matter density, which we think is a correlate of connections between cells, in a part of the brain called the amygdala, which happens to be the sort of the place where panic and rage are generated, or one of the places that are essential for their production. Yes?
I want to know, do you know if when you stop, is it reversible or is it permanent?
I think that it is like, the answer is yes. I think that is like any training, which is to say, or like everything else in your brain, that if you don't use it, it gradually reverts to its baseline. If you stop working out in the gym, you're still buff for a while, but if you stop for a couple of years, well, it's over, right? Then you go back and you have to start all over again. So I think it's like that, but I can't tell you actually with certainty. I think that at some point it becomes self-perpetuating or sustaining because you learn to do this kind of attentional management. You learn to hold, we can just drop the attention jargon and just say you learn to hold your mind in a certain way that allows it to be spacious and clear and balanced, and it becomes continuous. So you don't have to do this formal practice. The formal practice is like working out in the gym, and it actually feels like that. It feels like a workout. But once you have that kind of strength, and you're running, boy, that's not the right analogy. I better drop that analogy. But you're using that strength all day long. Like, you don't have to work out so hard. Like, it's just there. That's what I think, though.
I had a question. So I was wondering if there's any background research on why the mind behaves as it does. So from my practice, I've kind of seen that your mind is always either in the past or in the future. You close your eyes, the ability to actually stay in the present is very, very weak. So is there an evolutionary benefit of the mind behaving like that, or is there any sense of...
Yes. It's actually evolutionarily advantageous to be slightly anxious, to be vigilant, to be looking for threats in the environment, to be scanning your environment for, the saber-toothed tiger that's going to eat you. And so we're built that way. We're built to react to threats. We're built to amplify those reactions to threats. When a saber-toothed tiger is chasing you down the street, you are built to apply all of your physical and cognitive resources to survive. And so that's what happens when you're faced with a threat. Unfortunately, it's not that smart of a system, it's just that powerful of a system. So when the threat is somebody who insults you at a party later tonight, and all of that machinery gets activated, it kind of makes you crazy. And then you kind of go back to dwell on it, because if it was a close escape, if it was a close call, you're going to think about how to prevent it the next time. But actually, you just get stuck there. Like, a mind is a terrible thing to have sometimes, because it does do these things. So yes, it's advantageous, but in our environment, where we are faced with like dozens of threats all of the time, not doing well in this test, your social standing, your security, your relationships, whether people like you or not, what's going to happen, how about your finances, it's like all these systems are generating all this movement, all this energy, a lot of biology is happening underneath the surface. So even when nothing is happening, we're not very good at resting. We don't know how to rest. We haven't practiced it. We don't have the capability. And all these systems are telling us, don't sit down, something's happening. You need to do this, you need to do that. You need to get up. So it's 3 in the morning and we're staring at the ceiling. Oh my God, can't I go to sleep? Sorry. Biology has another idea. Okay, so, all right, so I was talking about Britta Holsel is the name of this researcher, who found that the gray matter density in the amygdala decreases in 8 weeks. Nobody believed it. Nobody believed it. She couldn't get it published for years because it wasn't our paradigm of the brain. When I went to medical school, I was taught that the brain that you have, at 25 is the brain that you live with for the rest of your life, except for what you lose because you don't take good care of it. And that is totally not true. The brain is actually growing and regrowing and changing. It's plastic. We call that neuroplasticity. And in fact, the only reason why Dr. Holsel got this paper published is that first, somebody did research, more kind of structured, randomized research, showing that when you learn to juggle, the regions of the brain that manage objects moving in 3-dimensional space had an increase in gray matter density. So suddenly, her research about mindfulness seemed to be, plausible, and it got published. Since then, there's been a huge explosion of research demonstrating that lots of different brain structures are changed by this. And so this is really the paradigm that has been developed to think about why mindfulness works in so many different domains that are important to us, in managing stress and distress, in regulating emotion. It's very, very important for that, in improving our capacity to make fine distinctions, judgments, decision-making, Like we can point to the brain areas that are changed by mindfulness practice and sort of associate them with the benefits that we can measure, like we measured in our students in the laboratory. So practicing mindfulness seems to be a good thing. If you know people who really do it, and some of you here, have done it a lot for a long time, they won't just tell you that it's a good thing to do. They'll tell you that it's changed their life. They'll tell you that it's the best thing that they ever did. I run this program in Philadelphia that has trained more than 15,000 people in this 8-week, 27-hour, very structured program. And people don't come out of that class and say, oh, that was really interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Baime. They come out of the class saying something like, wow, I thought that I was going to learn to manage my stress. And what I learned was that I can completely change my life. And I've heard that over and over and over again over many years, decades now. Yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to take a bit of a backtrack. I know there's been a lot of focus, we've been talking on attention. I can appreciate that, about like the attention to look and to touch and to love and things along those lines. But I also wanted to sort of comment on the fact that there's a sort of substrate that all of this attention is being directed back to, and that there's a sort of structure and phenomenon of interpretation, so that when we have attention to particular stimuli or processes, we're also interpreting them and narrating them to ourselves in a particular way. And how you see the relationship between the two, or whether attention can sort of circumvent and then attend to the interpretation, and about the facts and interpretation.
It's a specific question, but I absolutely can answer that. So the way that I'll language it is to say that immediately when we have an experience, we form, you call it an interpretation, we create a narrative about it. Let's just say that we're constantly making a narrative about what's happening. You are writing the sort of story of what's happening to you right now in your head right now. This narrative happens in an automatic way. You're not deciding to do it. It's one of the ways in which we have awareness of ourselves in our world is by creating a narrative of it. And the problem with that is that it happens quickly. It happens somewhat under the surface. We don't notice it happening, but we believe that narrative, and it might or might not be true. So somebody might be really stressed and anxious, and they walk by us and they look away. And we start thinking, oh man, that's because I forgot to pay him back those $20 that I owe him. And that's like totally not true. But we believe that narrative, it's our first thought, and we go with it, and we create a whole sort of thing around it. And then when we see them 2 days later, we go, oh man, I'm so sorry, I really, and they go, what are you talking about? Because you were wrong. But so there's another way of experiencing ourselves that doesn't depend on the narrative. We have an experience of ourselves that is based on experiencing, that is visceral, that is connected to our experience of the body, not our thoughts. It happens, well, it doesn't matter what part of the brain it happens in, but it's a different frame of self-referencing, a different way of experiencing the present moment. And what we find, like what we know from the research that has looked at this, is that people who have learned to practice mindfulness, when they leave the experience of the present moment and enter into a narrative or thinking about what's happening, when they leave the experiencing and enter the thinking about it, they come back much more quickly to the experiencing, and they go back and forth, which we think is a measure of how they have a thought and then they check it, and they have a thought and they check it. And they're more in touch with how they feel and their sense of what's going on, which is, as you probably know, is a really important leadership skill. It's really important. It's a really important interpersonal skill and for emotional intelligence. All sorts of things follow from that. That happens much more automatically for them, like they just come back and come back and come back after they've learned to practice mindfulness. Does that help?
Yeah, that's cool.
I wrote a summary of that research that it was in a, I wrote a sort of popular, like a review of some of the cognitive neuroscience things about mindfulness that I think are the most interesting. And that was one of the papers. I could send that around to you if you'd like.
That'd be helpful.
Did everybody see the Scientific American article that came out in November? It's like the, okay, I can send you a PDF of that too. There's a really nice review of the neuroscience of mindfulness in Scientific American. I'll pass it along. All right, so let me close the talking about neuroscience because I think this is maybe too theoretical, but I'll just tell you why I think this matters so much. So we know that by practicing mindfulness, you change all these regions in your brain. And this is of enormous importance because you're actually changing the hardware through which you have a life, through which you experience yourself. And without going into the specific things that happen, I'll just tell you that people who practice mindfulness find that their life has more meaning, that their relationships work better, that they are less anxious, less likely to feel sad about what's happened, that they are more likely to be grateful, to think that things will go well, that they're happier. And that a variety of essential cognitive functions like working memory and ability to make better decisions and so on are enhanced. Why doesn't everybody do it? Why? Well, actually, you are going to be doing it in grade school in not too long because pretty much every school district in Philadelphia is starting to do this. But why doesn't everybody that you know do it? You know people who tell you that it was the best thing that they ever did for themselves. There's all this research. How come you're not all meditating for an hour every day?
Maybe the same reason everyone's not exercising for an hour.
Damn, that was my line. It's hard. It's hard to do. It's work, especially at the beginning. Like once you exercise for 3 months, I don't know how many of you have been in that boat, but you don't want to stop. When you don't do it, you don't feel right. Exercise is another great way of enhancing cognitive performance, actually, and it physically helps you to feel better too. But there's a threshold that you have to get past. Learning to practice mindfulness is just like that. The learning curve is really steep. It's really hard. That's why, in the student class that we teach, I don't just ask people to meditate every day. I hold them accountable, right? I have an online service that's used by employers to track employees working off-site, and they have to log in and log out of their practice every day if they want to pass this course. No kidding. I have leverage. I get them to do it. And for the first 2 months, they're pissed. This is so unfair. This is so irritating. You're not there yet. But at the end, they say, that was the best thing that you ever could have done. It's like a personal trainer who cracks the whip. Like, they don't just let you go. They have your cell phone. Hey, Michael, you weren't here this morning. You have an appointment tomorrow. You've already paid for it, Are you going to come? Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm going to say one more thing, and then we're going to practice for the rest of the time that we have. What does this have to do with stress management? I just have to give a mention to stress management, because most people come to this because they want to deal with the stress of their life. It's not just about performance and finding meaning and whatever. And the real simple way that I can say it, and actually it was already said, is that we spend like a huge amount of our time in the past dredging up the worst things that ever happened to us and replaying them in a tape loop in our head. And we're not doing that. We're often leaning into the future and thinking about the next disaster. Oh man, I'm going to fail that test. It's like we have one of those little wheeled carry-on bags that we stuff all the stuff that is really awful into it. And then whenever we have a minute with nothing to do, we just unzip it and start pulling it out. It's like, wow, will you look at that? Oh, no. So mindfulness teaches us to come into the present moment and to just hang here for a little bit without actually doing anything else. And in that present moment, we kind of drop down into the body and find that right now, nothing is happening. At first, we feel terrified because it's so boring. Oh my God, nothing is happening. But as we start to get comfortable with that, we start to find that actually it becomes comforting and then actually really peaceful and deeply satisfying, because what we begin to connect with is ourself. And we have so little time to do that and no structured ways to do that. You know, it happens sometimes by coincidence when you exercise, when you fall in love, when you eat a delicious dessert. It's like you have those moments. But practicing mindfulness gives you a way to create them. And so that's why people have done this for 3,000 years, and why it's passed from generation to generation and from culture to culture in a way that that really has allowed it to grow and to develop for so many millennia. I mean, I'm not going to talk about the definition of meditation or mindfulness. I should have done that at the beginning, but I'm out of time. I'm not going to talk about how it's changed and why it's coming into our culture now in specific. I think that those are two interesting things, but maybe I'll come back sometime, or maybe there'll be another venue. But I really want to practice this with you so you have some idea of what I'm talking about. So if that's okay, oh good heavens, I have 15 minutes. All right, let's take it. We're going to practice mindfulness. How many of you have practiced mindfulness before? Again, raise your hands. Okay, so I want everybody, all of you, to just pay attention to one breath. Take a breath in and a breath out and just notice what it feels like. And when you're finished, you can open your eyes. If you don't open your eyes in another 10 seconds or so, I'm going to start CPR. Okay, so now you've all practiced mindfulness. That's it. There's no mystery here, folks. It's not exotic. Mindfulness is taking the part of your mind that notices, that's awake, that pays attention, and focusing it on something that's happening in the present moment. If you learned to do it 3,000 years ago, you focused it on a Sanskrit syllable that you repeated to yourself. If you learned to do it 20 years ago, you did the same thing, except they called it transcendental meditation and they charged more. If you learned to do it in 2015, you can go to Harvard and study with Herbert Benson at the Mind-Body Institute. And he'll tell you to do the same thing with two differences. One is he won't use Sanskrit. He'll have you focus on an English word, the number one. And he'll charge even more. So progress marches on, right? But that's what you guys are learning about. So some things stay the same and some things are different. So we're going to do that for 15 minutes. It's going to be boring. Nothing's going to happen. But I'm going to ask you to just allow your mind to wander when it does. Because the thing that drives you crazy when you practice mindfulness is when you begin to fight with your mind wandering. Your mind is going to wander. The reason why your mind is going to wander is because you're still alive. And that's what your mind is supposed to do. So just let it happen. But each time you notice that the mind has wandered, I want you to gently bring it back to what we're focusing on. I'm going to focus on the sensations of the body and the breath. That's all we're going to focus on. So make yourself comfortable. My advice is not to lean back in this chair, because you might end up on the floor, but scooch forward a little bit and feel where your backside presses against the chair. That's your center of gravity. Let your torso be centered over that and upright, and just let everything else fall into place. You can have your feet flat on the floor, rest your hands on your legs. Closing your eyes if that's comfortable for you. If it's not, don't worry about it. Just direct your gaze downward, just so that your the visual environment isn't so distracting. And noticing now what it feels like to be here right now. Noticing how the breath is gently moving the body, how the body expands, and how the body returns to where it started. And feeling the whole body, all the way from the soles of the feet, up to the top of the head, and out to the fingertips. Just seeing what it feels like to be here, right now. And maybe noticing that your mind wants something else to do. Your mind goes, huh? Is that all? So let's give the mind something to do. Let's focus on the sensations that are present in the area of your face right now. So I want you to focus in here and notice as much as you can about the sensations in your face, the forehead, the eyes, nose, cheeks, the ears off to the sides, the mouth, the lips, and the inside of the mouth, all the way to the back of the throat, the chin and the jaw. Noticing where there's holding or tension. Just noticing what it's like. And you don't have to do anything, so you can let all these different parts of the face take their natural shape. They don't have to express anything. They don't have to contain anything. You're just feeling. And when you notice a sensation, any sensation, focusing in on that so that you feel more of that sensation. Feeling as much of that sensation as you can so that that sensation fills all of your awareness. Just staying there until the mind moves on to something else. And then focusing on that. And then noticing the rest of the sensations in the area of the head, the top of the head, the sides of the head, and the back of the head. The scalp, the tissue underneath, all the way down to the bone of the skull. Just noticing whatever sensation calls you or draws your attention there and focusing in more closely right there. Then, whenever you're ready, with your next breath, whenever you like, taking in a deeper breath, a full inhalation, and pausing for just a moment or two to feel that sensation of fullness in the body, breathing all the way down into the body, staying with that for a moment or two, and then when you're ready, whenever you like, breathing out and letting go. Just letting those sensations that you notice go their own way. And just letting the attention rest for a moment or two. And then bringing the attention down to meet the sensations in the area of the neck. The front of the neck, maybe feeling the contact with clothing or the air in the room. The back of the neck, the bones of the spine in the neck, and the muscles that support that. Even into the center of the neck, if you like, maybe feeling a lump or a fullness there. Just noticing as much as you can about the sensations present in these areas. And noticing also how often your attention has wandered away, how often you've drifted off. And remembering that that isn't something to struggle with, that that's natural, that that's how it should be. that the practice of mindfulness is simply noticing what is happening, so that when you notice that you've wandered off, you're actually not wandering anymore. You're already back in the present moment, noticing exactly what's happening. And your body is here too. You can just come back simply, without a lot of drama, without any struggle. Continuing down now into the area of the shoulders, between the base of the neck and the shoulder joint, muscle and tissue. One of the places where we can often feel the residue of tension or strain, just feeling that now to see what sensation is here. Exploring it as much as you can without trying to change it, but just trying to feel it exactly as it is, moment by moment. And then, at your own pace, whenever you like, continuing down past the shoulder joint into the arms, and just choosing where you'd like to focus, exploring sensations in the upper arms, elbows, forearms, wrists, and hands all the way out to the fingertips. So many sensations there. Just find what comes to you and focus in more closely. And then when you're ready, taking another deeper breath, breathing all the way into the body and filling the body with the breath, with as much breath as is comfortable. Staying in that sensation of fullness for a minute, and then when you're ready, just letting go. Releasing the breath. Letting go of the sensations and giving the attention a moment to rest in itself, not asking it to go anywhere or to do anything. And then bringing the attention into the area of the upper part of the torso, the chest and the upper back. Beginning at the front of the chest, feeling the sensations at the skin surface, underneath that the breasts, and deep to that the chest wall, the sternum or breastbone in the center, the ribs and tissues between the ribs curving out to the sides and then around under the arms, and then curving all the way around until the ribs meet up with the spine at the center of the back. Feeling that spine rising up into the shoulders, the muscles at either side, and feeling into the area around the shoulder blades, all around. Feeling this entire three-dimensional shape expand as you breathe in, and feeling it return to where it began as you exhale. If you like, feeling more deeply into the center of the chest, maybe finding the sensation of the beating of the heart. Or maybe not. Maybe something else. Maybe a fullness or an emptiness or an ache or a sharpness. Or it could be anything, just noticing. And then, when you're ready, taking another deep, full inhalation and filling this area, the chest and the upper back with the breath, with as much breath as is comfortable, and staying in that sensation for a few moments. And then, when you're ready, letting go. Letting go of all of the sensation, just letting everything be as it is. Just for a moment or two. And then continuing down into the lower part of the torso, the belly and the lower back, front of the belly, the surface, the abdominal wall underneath, these structures moving gently, changing sensation gently with each moment of breath. Feeling around to the sides of the belly, sides of the abdomen, and then further around to the flank, and finally all the way around to the center of the lower back, the lumbar spine, arching up out of the pelvis, curving towards the navel, and then curving back. And feeling this entire shape again expand with each breath and return with each exhalation, filling and releasing, expanding and letting go. Taking one more complete deep inhalation, breathing all the way down to fill the entire belly and lower back with the breath, staying in that sensation for a few moments, and then breathing out and letting go of everything, letting the attention just rest without focusing anywhere, just resting in itself. And then finally continuing down into the pelvis, starting at the back of the pelvis, feeling the contact of the buttocks with your chair, very distinct contact at the surface of the body. Maybe noticing the deeper pressure of the bones of the pelvis against the muscles and deeper tissues. Feeling that sensation. Feeling into the sides of the pelvis in the area of the hips. The front of the pelvis. The bottom of the pelvis, the perineum, the area of the genitals. If you like, feeling more deeply into the center of the pelvis. Just noticing. And then, whenever you like, continuing down from the bottom of the pelvis into the hips, and then from there into the legs. And again, at your own pace, exploring sensations in the thighs, knees, lower legs, ankles, and feet, all the way down to the soles of the feet and out to the tips of the toes. And when you're ready now, taking one more deep, complete inhalation in, if you'd like, if it makes sense to you, imagining that you could breathe down past the pelvis into the legs and feet. Just what would that feel like if the breath could flow all the way down to fill this entire part of the body? And then when you're ready, releasing, letting go. And just resting here, simply, for a few moments. Noticing that the body is breathing by itself. And for the last minute or two, just completely entering that sensation of breath, of expansion and of return. Not worrying about the shape of the body or where the breath goes, but just feeling the sensation from the inside. Expanding as you breathe in, the feeling of fullness, and then releasing, the feeling of letting go. Filling and letting go. Just letting yourself become that expansion and that release. Just another minute or so. So on your own, bringing all of your attention to settle fully with each moment of each cycle of breath. And now with your next breath, taking another full and complete inhalation and filling the entire body with the breath. Expanding all of the body with a full, complete inhalation. Letting it reach all the way down to the toes and up to the top of the head and out to the fingertips. And then, as you let go, just completely settling into this moment right now. And just feeling what it is like to actually be here. The feeling of being embodied, the mystery of this awareness, completely woven into the fabric of this physical body. Feeling of aliveness, of embodiment. Just appreciating it. Every gift that your life has to offer comes through this original gift. Mystery, unknowable, and yet always right here. And so, as we prepare to close this practice, just allowing yourself to remember the surface of the body and then the room around you. And before you open the eyes, just set the intention to stay connected to this feeling of embodiment, of aliveness, of presence for a bit. And then when you're ready, preparing for the transition that will come when you open the eyes and become aware of the room, and staying in the body, in the experience, and opening your eyes just gently. And just resting here for a moment, noticing how it may feel different to be here with the eyes opening, but also noticing that everything that was here before is still here. That what happens as we go through our life is that we just become distracted from this more essential, underlying aspect of our experience, the experience of being here, which is actually always available, doesn't get stressed or reactive, it's just here. Even when you get really bent out of shape, there's a part of you that's watching, going, oh my goodness, you are really bent out of shape. It's always here. And so training in mindfulness allows you to drop into that and with practice to stay here so that you don't have to undo stress because you don't react in the same way. So thank you for your attention, for your interest, for the invitation. Really appreciate it. It was a total pleasure to meet with you, and I hope to cross your path again. I'm at my time boundary, so I'm going to close, but I'll stick around if you have questions or comments or want to ask them. So thank you.
A couple quick announcements from the group before you head out, hopefully. So first of all, thank you so much, Dr. Baime and Riddle, for setting up this event, bringing us all together. For those of you who aren't familiar with the mindfulness group, right now we basically do two things, which is very similar to what we did today. We talk about mindfulness, similar to what Dr. Baime did for the first half of the session, and then we practice it also. We have these flash meditation sessions in Huntsman. We do this stuff pretty much every week. So if you just join the Facebook group, get on the newsletter, you can do more of what you did today if you really enjoyed it. And then myself and Riddle will stick around as well if you have any questions. But thank you so much for coming out. I know there's so many other things you can be doing with your time. We really appreciate being here and learning and being here with us. So thank you.
And I'll send a recording of a guided practice like what we just did. It'll be a little bit longer and a couple of things that you might be interested in reading relevant to the things that we talked about. Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty.